They gave me Vicodin after my knee surgery. They kept prescribing it, so I kept taking it. I didn't know it would be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
Hello, and welcome to Cleveland Knockers, a program dedicated to educating you about justice system and the people behind it. In this episode, we will talk with former Cleveland Municipal Court Judge C. Ellen Connally, who is also former County Council President. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Judge
It's a pleasure
Connally.
to be here.
Thank you, thank you. How have you been?
Good, thank you.
Glad to hear that. We're going to talk about your time with the Cleveland Municipal Court, and you're so busy, we've got to delve into some other things you're doing. But first of all, tell me about your young life. Are you from Cleveland?
Yes, I was born in Cleveland at University Hospital, and I grew up in the Glenville area. And I went to Catholic schools. I went to St. Thomas Aquinas and then to Notre Dame Academy. So I'm a Cleveland person. I've never lived any place other than Cleveland, other than the 4 years or so I spent at Bowling Green State University.
Okay. It's lifelong Clevelander. Catholic education. You graduated from high school.
Yes.
Went to Bowling Green. What was your major there?
My major was history, and I liked Bowling Green a great deal. In fact, I'm going there on Thursday for something.
Okay. Well,
I'm past president of the University Board of Trustees.
how long did you serve as president of the University Trustees?
I was president for a year, but I served on the board for 9 years.
9 years. Okay.
I'd also been an alumni trustee, so I was up there. I haven't been there so much recently, but I used to go there a lot.
Okay. Well, you get involved in things and keep going. History major. Was there any particular subject area in history while you were at Bowling Green?
I've always been interested in post-Civil War America. So I went on to, after law school, or actually while I was a judge, I went back and got a master's in history, and I completed all my work except for a dissertation in history at the University of Akron. And I'm interested in this period between the Civil War and the beginning of the 20th century.
Reconstruction and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a whole nother subject for another TV
Right.
show.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also doing a lot of stuff on the Kennedy assassination. So those are my two areas.
And you find time.
I find time to do all of these things.
Okay. Well, after college, you went to law school.
Yes, I graduated from college in January, and my father had an insurance business, and I used to kind of work in the insurance business, and also I was a substitute teacher. And then I went to law school in September, so in the fall. So I went basically straight from college to law school.
Okay.
And I was the only girl in my class, and there was me and one male students from Liberia, so we were the only two people of color in our class. And I was in the first day class at Cleveland State University. It was essentially a night school, and they started the day class the year that I started.
Okay. And you did law school, survived that rigorous program. What did you do directly after law school? Or did you work during the summers while you were in law school?
When I was in law school, I worked one summer at City Hall as a law clerk, and then I worked for Judge Carl J. Character. He was a licensed attorney. It was actually Stokes, Terry, and Perry, and I worked at that law firm during law school. I worked in the afternoons or in the summertime. So I got some really, really good practical experience there.
Okay, and that was Character, Stokes, and Terry.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Was that Stokes as in Carl and Lewis?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so you got to meet them before?
Well, not really. Lou a little bit, but Carl had already gone. Carl was already the mayor.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what did they have you doing at the law firm?
Oh, I would do like some probate stuff and filing things and just kind of catch all. I could type, so I'd sometimes fill in as a secretary, and you know, research and just all kinds of miscellaneous things.
Okay, okay. Now, before you ran for judge, you did some other things.
Right. After I passed the bar, I got a job as a law clerk at the 8th District Court of Appeals. I was a law clerk for Judge Alvin I. Krensler. And then from there...
Was that Buddy Krensler?
Buddy Krensler.
Buddy Krensler.
And from there, I got a job as a magistrate at the probate court, where I worked for about 8 years. And I really liked my years at probate court. It was really interesting dealing with people's lives and guardianships and adoptions and all kinds of probate. In fact, I still have people that call me about, you know, probate questions. What should they do?
And I hear people talking about probate court from the birth certificate to the death certificate.
That's correct.
And everything in between. Probate court has some effect on it. I didn't practice much there, so...
yeah, and you have lawyers come and say, like, I've never been here before, what do I do? And, you know, you walk them through and help them out. So it was a good experience.
All right, good, good, good. And the 8th District Court of Appeals.
And yeah, you did research and writing for the judges.
Okay, that's a good background to have before you run. Well, what made you decide to run for judge?
You know, I kind of always wanted to be a judge. I think maybe just like seeing things on television, and I just decided to run. And people said, well, you know, you probably can't win. And I ran against a judge who'd been on the bench for many years, Judge Hugh Brennan, and he was aging and was kind of very competent. And you know, it was a woman's name, and I ran and I won. Okay. And I got, you know, I got support from people in the community, and you know, I pulled it off. Okay. And I was the first black woman who was a Democrat elected in the state of Ohio. So there had been 3 other black women on the bench. They were all Republicans, and they had all been appointed and then retained their seats. But I was the first black woman that was elected straight up in the state of Ohio.
Well, who helped you campaign?
Well, you know, I remember Zeke Forbes and David Collier and, you know, some friends, and I just go around and talk to people, and, you know, I think at first they were kind of blowing me off, and then as it kept going, I got some endorsements. I got the Plain Dealer endorsement, and, you know, was just shaking hands. I remember my dad helped me a lot, and my dad knew a lot of people, and I was fortunate to have a very good name also. Okay,
well, I remember meeting your father when I was a teenager, maybe, on 105 in St. Clair. I was with my father. Okay. And your father was had an insurance business. And they stood on the corner and talked for a little while. He shook my hand, I left, and but he had a way of making people feel comfortable. And so I remember that from a long time ago. A good handshake.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, you just have to give it a try. That, you know, it was a challenge, and you know, it was a lot more work than I thought about at the time. But actually, after running in the city, it's a lot easier than running for the whole county. But back then, I think I had to get 1,000 signatures, and that wasn't easy. Now you only have to get 50, but getting all those 1,000 signatures, you know, that was difficult.
Well, and hopefully all those people who signed the petition voted for you, told their friends, and worked out well. Now, you've also run for some other offices in your career.
Yes, I ran once for the Court of Appeals and once for Common Pleas Court. Okay. And I was not successful. But probably better because I love Cleveland Municipal Court.
How many years did you serve on the court?
For 24 years.
Do you remember who the AJPJs were, administrative judges and presiding judges?
Judge Burke. And I know Fleming was in for a while. I think when I first came, it was Judge Williams, maybe. Okay, okay. Lillian Burke, Chuck Fleming, and Judge Williams. And then Judge Adrian. And I was the administrative judge, I think, for 1 year. Okay, okay. Well, what do you remember about the Cleveland Municipal Court? When I first came to Cleveland Municipal Court, of course, I was the youngest person there. We had no housing court. While I was there, they created the housing court. I remember that we'd got very, very few women for driving while under the influence. You know, you'd have 10 cases and maybe 1 woman. And I don't know if women didn't drink as much outside the home or the police didn't arrest them, but I just remember we had very, very few women in the drinking and driving cases. There was no domestic violence.
No domestic violence docket?
No, well, there was no such crime as domestic violence when I first.
Okay, no crime.
It started
of
like
domestic
I
violence.
think in the mid '80s, and there was sort of a cadre of regulars in the arraignment room on the 3rd floor. So we had a whole group of women that were engaged in prostitution. You know, we kind of knew them. We knew their names. We knew their children. We knew their families, and it was just kind of a lifestyle for them. And we were always trying to help them and get them out. But I think it was more familial at the court. Like everybody kind of knew each other, and we always have nice Christmas parties.
All right. Now on the 3rd floor, that's where arraignments happen. Somebody gets arrested. Their next court date's on the 3rd floor. What happens on the 3rd floor?
Well, it's where really justice kind of meets the road. It's the first court appearance. So some people call it the drunk tank. It's people who've been in jail all night, or maybe a whole weekend, and so you're the first judge that they see. Okay. And we used to have a lot of preliminary hearings back then on felony cases. So, we would have, you ended up on TV a lot because, if somebody was charged with, some murder or some heinous crime, that they would appear before the municipal court judge and set bond. And we frequently had actually preliminary hearings, which now they all waive and go straight to the grand jury.
That's true. The big majority of them now waive and go straight to the grand jury. So we don't see as much of that now.
I was actually foreman of the grand jury after I left the court, and that was a very interesting experience.
Had you ever been in the grand jury proceedings before that?
No, I had never been before. I think once I testified, when I was in probate court, I testified from the record about a lawyer that absconded with some money, but that was my first experience with the grand jury. It was very interesting. Okay,
and everybody says that, either if it's about jury trials. When I was on city council, people would call me and want to get out of doing jury trial duty. And I would try and talk them into doing it because it's an experience they'll never forget.
Yeah, so many people say they're really glad they did it. And I encourage people to go ahead and do jury duty because nobody's better than you are. You're a citizen, you're intelligent, so you should do it.
I agree. And did you have some good jury trials that you remember?
Oh, not anything thrilling. Let me think I can remember offhand. I know I was always very hard on anybody that had any animal abuse cases. If the prosecution would always want me to have the case because I love animals and I just couldn't stand anybody that would abuse a dog or a cat or any kind of animal.
Okay, and you have a couple of dogs.
I just have one. One of mine just passed away.
Oh, sorry to hear that. And dog lovers. So, jury trials with a dog abuse case as somebody in trouble.
Yes.
Now, who else did you serve with on the court?
Oh, let's see. Judge Capers, the two Judge McManamans, the two Judge Harper and Judge Trumbull, who were also married. Francis Sweeney, Charles Fleming. Let's see, Judge Adrian. I served with Judge Saffold.
You were there with a number of
I was. Yeah, people were coming and going.
Up.
Judge Mulcahy was there when I first came, and then Judge Adrian defeated him.
Okay.
Judge Clarence
Let's
Gaines.
talk about Judge Adrian for a moment. You said there was no domestic violence docket when you started being a
right,
judge.
because there was no such crime as domestic violence. I mean, you'd had women coming in and charging a man with assault, but there was no specific crime entitled domestic violence.
Okay. Now, Judge Adrian wrote a book.
Yes, Judge Adrian's been very, very much involved in the whole concept of domestic violence. He's become sort of the national expert.
And I think you were probably on the bench while he was writing the book.
That's correct.
So you remember him doing research and talking about this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's given and taken many seminars, taken the court protocol around the nation. And it's been an invaluable amount of information that he's passed on.
So this has kind of really started here in Cleveland with this domestic violence charges.
Yeah, it was very frustrating to me that you would have a victim who would come in and you need to get the protection order signed and all the paperwork done, and I'd either miss lunch or be late for lunch, and get all the paperwork done so she could have that protection order, and then they'd come in for a hearing and you'd see her walk in, sort of hugged up with the husband. And then when I was a visiting judge, this is a very sad story, I got a call and they said, can you sit in for Judge Cassidy? And I said, yeah, I can do it. So I came in and I had this case, and this guy came in, he had violated his protection order. And he had, beat up his wife again. And so I violated him and sent him to jail for the rest of his sentence. And his wife was in court. And I said, you've got to break up with this guy, that he's very dangerous. And I said, he's going to kill you. And she kind of blew me off. And I remember, I'll never forget this, after the court was over, I think it was the court reporter and a couple of bailiffs came up and said, that guy was really bad. And I go, yeah, I was like kind of scared of him. He was bad. Well, they called me about a month later, he killed her. And it was really very sad, very tragic. And I was on, I was on the news. And then some of the domestic violence people, actually, advocates, were critical of me that I had spoken so harshly to her. But I didn't see any other way but to tell her she had to get away from this guy. And she didn't, and she ended up dying.
Okay, well, and we see that all too often. We can't predict the future. And there are social workers and probation officers who try and intervene, but we do our best to avoid those situations.
And this woman was a marriage counselor. And she just, I don't know, she just couldn't get away from this guy. It was very sad. Okay. Well, happier moments. Okay.
Judge Capers.
Oh, Judge Capers was different.
Tell me about Judge Capers.
Judge Capers, came as judge at sort of at the end of her career. And, she kind of had her own way and her own style.
That's polite. I was a prosecutor for a number of years, working in her room, and it was a unique place to be, but there were always good stories in her courtroom as how she dealt with things. And people still talk about her.
Yeah, she would stay for long hours. I really can't even figure out sometimes what she did, but she would be there till late in the evening a lot.
Okay. Now, we talked about how the domestic violence laws got started in Cleveland. Were there any other programs that got started while you were a judge to try and help people?
I know I used to volunteer a lot. We had the weekend intervention program, so rather than going to jail, that you would go to this intervention program in lieu of jail. And that worked out really well, because if you have a problem with drinking and driving, just to sit in jail is not going to necessarily help you. So you went to this program starting on Friday evening and stayed till Sunday. You would teach you about drinking and driving and alcoholism, and people really found that beneficial.
And that started while you were a judge?
Yes, that started while I used to volunteer. I used to go out on Friday night and talk to the defendants.
Okay. And we're still doing that now.
And then we developed the first offender program. We expanded that. They used to be free, and I was the one that complained and finally put a fee on that, because it was costing the court money to run that program. The people weren't paying anything. And so we occasionally, you can't waive the fee for someone that's totally indigent, but I thought that it was better to make the person pay to make them feel some responsibility.
Okay, and that was the first offenders program. Somebody first time getting a ticket, getting in trouble with the law. And
then sometime when I was in the arraignment room, if I'd see a person that had a marijuana charge and they had a pretty good no other record, and they were a young person, I asked the prosecutor, say, why don't you give this guy like a disorderly conduct or something, so that we'll give him the maximum fine so he won't have that drug record. Because some people years later, you're apply for a job and you got this misdemeanor charge on marijuana from years ago, and I had one gentleman stop me. I was going to the federal building, and I was going through security, and he was kind of gruff and said, "Yeah, you can go through." And I go, "Did I do something to you?" He said, "Yeah." You were my judge. He said, "No," he said, "but you gave me a break." And he said, "That's the reason I have this job." Okay. He said, "If you hadn't given me that break," he said, "I wouldn't have this job." And here's a guy supporting his family, he's got a job. So that's one of the things that kind of makes you feel good. Yeah, I had a motion for expungement today, motion to seal record, very issue you're talking about, granted it, send it on its way, because I know the young lady, it was 10 years ago, she got a conviction, probably applied for a job, and this thing popped up and stopped her from getting the job. And misdemeanor convictions shouldn't dwell on this record forever. It shouldn't ruin the rest of your life. Yeah, so. Yeah, we would hope so.
politics. What are you doing now?
Well, I do lots of things. I'm on the board of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument on Public Square, so everybody stop and visit. It's a great, it'll be 125 years old next year.
Congratulations.
And so I'm involved in the Cleveland Civil War Roundtable. I'm on the board at the Heritage Museum at League Park, which is a wonderful place to bring your family. It's free. Babe Ruth hit one of his home runs there. You can get it to have your team play baseball there.
That's the old Cleveland Indian Stadium.
Right.
They have a museum.
Yes, there's a museum there. And then I'm on the board of the Ohio History Connection, which used to be called the Ohio Historical Society. So I'm involved in lots of history projects. And then I work with Judge Burt Griffin. We teach seminars on the Kennedy assassination.
All right. Let's take a break right now for a moment, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Cleveland Honors. Today we're talking with former Cleveland Municipal Court Judge C. Ellen Connally, who was also former Cuyahoga County President. Welcome. I'm glad to have you back. We were beginning to talk about your travels and what you're doing other than now that you're retired.
Well, I also write for Cool Cleveland, which is an online newspaper, and I used to try to write different things about Cleveland and historical things. And I do a lot of research for Judge Burt Griffin, who was a staff attorney for the Warren Commission, and he is writing a book, and we also do seminars and presentations about the Kennedy assassination. So,
well, you'll have to tell the audience, because there's some people who have no idea what the Warren Commission was.
Okay, the Warren Commission was the commission that studied the assassination of President John F. Kennedy.
And Burt Griffin was
a lawyer for the commission. There were 9 commissioners, and he was a lawyer that did, the sort of the seed work, the everyday work, investigation.
And he's from Cleveland.
Right.
And he was a former county judge.
That's right. And so he has me do research for him from time to time.
Okay.
And I'm a Kennedy aficionado.
I've heard about your Kennedy collection at home.
Yes.
What's in that Kennedy collection?
Oh, I have all kinds of books and glasses and cups, and I go around the house sales and look for plates, and then people give me things. And I keep saying I'm going to die, and my son's going to have it all on a yard sale for $1. So.
Well, and people have told me about this Kennedy collection. So how long have you been at this?
From the day of the assassination.
Did you know Burt Griffin before he went to D.C.?
No, I met him when he was a judge.
Okay.
And it just happened that my son went to Shaker Schools and lived near where Judge Griffin lived, and I would pick him up. He always took the Rapids, so I'd pick him up a lot of times, and we would talk about the assassination. But I actually went to the Kennedy grave. It was on the 22nd, and I was actually at Bowling Green State University, and then I came home, and then we went to Philadelphia to visit relatives, and then my dad and I went to Washington. He had an aunt that lived there, and then we actually went to the Kennedy gravesite the Friday after Thanksgiving. So the flowers and everything were there.
Okay.
Of course, I didn't have a camera then. I should have had a camera taking the picture.
Was the eternal flame going?
Oh, the eternal flame was lit the same day, the day of the burial.
Okay. It's been going ever since.
It's been going ever since. They had to move. We actually moved the grave about 2 or 3 feet downhill and reconnected the flame, but it's never been out.
Okay. Okay.
And then I go to presidential graves. I've been to 22 presidential graves, working on.
What started that?
I'm just sort of a presidential historian, trivia buff. I guess you can't out-trivia me on presidential trivia. And then, because I do some stuff at Lakeview Cemetery with the Garfield Monument also.
Okay, you give tours there?
I can.
Okay, okay. Now, you're going to Illinois pretty soon.
Next year,
Next year.
taking the Cleveland Civil War Roundtable on a field trip to the Lincoln grave and home in Springfield, Illinois.
Why?
Well, the Cleveland Civil War Roundtable, which you can go online and join, it's a great institution. We meet once a month, the second Wednesday at Judson Manor. The Civil War buffs and the Roundtable usually want to go to grave sites. And so I like President Lincoln a lot. And so I thought that it would be interesting to take them to Lincoln's grave and Lincoln's home. His law office is under renovation right now, so I don't think we're going to be able to go there. But I've been there. I drove my son's car from California, I don't know, a long time ago, maybe 8-10 years ago. And I stopped at Eisenhower's house, Truman's house, and Lincoln's house.
Ooh, that was a good trip.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very good trip. That's in Springfield.
Springfield, Illinois.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And you know, when President Lincoln was elected, he stopped in Cleveland on his way to Washington. And so when he died, they retraced the route. So he was actually laid in state on Public Square.
After his assassination?
Yeah, on April 26th. He wasn't buried until the 5th of May.
Okay. And what year was that?
1865.
1865. And from Cleveland, he made his way back to Springfield and was buried in Illinois.
Oak Ridge Cemetery.
Okay. Does he have one of those big tombs like they have at Lakeview Cemetery?
Yes, he was originally one of the presidents who was buried above ground, but then I think it was 1898, someone tried to steal his grave. I might have the year wrong. Someone tried to steal his body. So they actually took his body out of the tomb and then eventually sunk it and put like 6 feet of cement on top of it.
Ooh. Okay, well, and you've been there already.
Oh yes, I've been there. Mm-hmm.
Now, next year, you'll be the president of the Roundtable.
The Cleveland Civil War Roundtable,
Well,
right.
congratulations. How long have you been involved with that group?
Oh, I don't know, 15 years or so. I just started going and they sucked me into being an officer.
Okay. Were you a student of the Civil War?
My dad was a student of the Civil War.
So that's how you got started.
Yeah, and so I've kind of always, I'm a history person. So, but you know, American history kind of starts with Lincoln for me. So I went to see Hamilton. I know a little bit about Hamilton. I have his book sitting on the shelf, but I don't know a whole lot about Washington and Jefferson. A little bit, but not a lot.
They call Lincoln's time the second beginning of the country.
Yes, and Lincoln is consistently rated the best president. On these presidential ratings, one of the good things about the current administration is that some of my Ohio guys like Grant and Harding are always at the bottom. Well, they've been knocked up a notch now.
Okay, okay, Civil War stuff. We've talked about the court and some of your hobbies. Your neighborhood and neighborhood politics, you didn't stop when you retired as a judge.
Well, I ran for the Chief Justice of the Ohio Supreme Court in 2004, and then I was, doing some other things.
Did you travel the state when you were running?
Oh yes, I traveled all over.
You campaigned all over the state.
Campaigned all the state. It's a big state.
How did they receive you?
Very good.
Okay, was it a good experience?
Yes, it was a very, very good experience. I came within about I came very close to winning.
Okay. Yeah.
But then in 2010, when actually 2009, when they changed our county form of government, I knew these positions were open for county council, and I decided to run again. So I ran. I was in District 9, which is Cleveland, Bedford Heights, Woodmere, Shaker. And then I was elected to county council, and then my peers elected me president of the county council.
That was just as they were forming the new government.
Yes, so I was really, we formed the new government. We established all the rules for the meetings, the staff, the procedures. It was a very, very interesting and challenging experience.
And your legal judicial background helped out with all that.
I think so, and I think just the experience I had in terms of processes and setting up systems, and then working with the staff that was there, it was a very interesting experience.
Good, good. How long did you serve on
4
county?
years.
4 years,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
I could have run for re-election, but I just decided had enough.
All right, now, is there a book in your future? I heard you talking about the book.
No, I write, I write articles. Writing a book is a whole different challenge, so I write articles like once a week or so.
Okay.
I probably have another couple of law review articles in me to write and research. I have 2 law review articles published.
Ooh, on what subjects?
On the one is on the legal proceedings against Jefferson Davis after the Civil War, and people want to know, how did you get involved in that? Well, the judge.
Before you go there, now we have people who have no idea who Jeff Davis was.
Okay, Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America, and he was charged with treason after the Civil War. He was the only person charged with treason after the Civil War, and he was supposed to be put on trial. And the judge would have been Salmon P. Chase, who was Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and he was from Ohio. So that's how I got involved in this, because of this Ohio connection. I always like to have an Ohio connection.
Okay.
So I wrote this law review article for the University of Akron Law Review, and they also did a law review which is published in the Journal of Supreme Court History, having to do with an early integration case in Augusta, Georgia, and had to do with my relatives and stuff. So that was kind of interesting.
Your relatives integrating what in Georgia?
They raised the question of equal protection, in that they were not allowed to go to regular schools, and they raised the question of, well, they were paying taxes, and why weren't they allowed to go to school? And it's a long, complicated procedure, but it was an interesting experience. It's one of those experiences where I was so protective of my work that I had it on an old disc, and I would take it with me if I left my house, and afraid my house would burn down and I'd lose all my research. And going to the library at 11 o'clock at night, and the law library at a Case Western Reserve, which stays open late.
Yes, yes. Well, what was the outcome?
The outcome?
Of that case in Georgia?
The outcome was unfortunate that Justice Harlan, who had written the dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson, said that they had not raised the issue timely. So it was a question of timing. But the case is cited in a lot of civil rights litigation.
Okay. Okay, so you're staying busy with many, many fronts. Anything else we need to know about?
Well, I like to read. I think that we have a wonderful library system in our community. Our county library is wonderful. I use county library, Shaker Library, Cleveland Public Library, and I think that a lot of times people in our community don't utilize our libraries as much as we can. So I'm a great, devotee of the libraries, because I read a lot. Next week you're going to get a call from the library board asking you to get busy on their board. Well, I would love to be on the library board because I like libraries, but I think it's important for people to read, and I get very disappointed when people say I haven't read a book in a long time. Okay. It may be time for us to end this conversation, and there's so much more we can talk about, so thank you for being here. Let me ask you something. What do you see as the most important challenge the court faces today, and what do you suggest we can do to improve how the court operates? Well, I think one of the most important challenges is that people vote for the judges, whether it's common pleas or court of appeals or municipal court, that they stay in the polling place, do their research, and decide who they want to vote for, because there's this tremendous drop-off from people that will vote for the top of the ticket and then don't vote for the judges. And then if they go to court and then they're not satisfied with what happened, or they said, why did I get this decision? So it's important to have people vote. It's important to have court accessible to the people so that you can get there. And I continue to be concerned about so many people that end up with driving while under suspension for sometimes almost technicalities, that if you don't have a driver's license, you really have a difficult time getting a job. So many things are detrimental to you. So we need to work with people to get those old traffic tickets cleaned up, get those points off their driver's license, and get licensed driver and insured drivers on the road, because it's very important to all communities. Yes, it is, and that's one of the consistent things we see every docket down at the Cleveland Municipal Court. So once again, thank you for your service. It's been good talking to you. Thank you also for tuning into this episode of Cleveland Honors. And remember, as John Locke once said, where law ends, tyranny begins. So long, everyone.